Captain Maya Grant stepped out of her vehicle and looked at the tall fence that surrounded the military compound. The desert sun was hot on her face and the wind carried sand across the empty road. She had driven 3 hours from the base to get here and she was not going to turn back now. The building ahead looked plain and boring like any other government facility, but Maya knew what it really was. This was where the military tested its best soldiers for special operations against alien threats. She had received the message 4 days ago, telling her to come here for a secret tactical drill. The message came from Commander Phillips himself, and Maya had been excited because this kind of invitation meant her career was moving forward. She walked to the security checkpoint, carrying her folder with all her military papers inside. A guard stood behind the barrier and he wore the uniform of a lieutenant. His name tag said Morrison and he did not smile when Maya approached. She handed him her identification card and the printed copy of her orders. Morrison took them and scanned them with his device. He looked at the screen for a long time and then he looked at Maya with a blank expression. He shook his head slowly and handed her papers back to her. Maya felt confusion rising in her chest. She asked what the problem was and Morrison told her that her name was not on the approved list. He said the drill was invitation only and that she could not enter. Maya felt her hands tighten on the folder. She had served 8 years in the Terran Defense Force and had earned every promotion through hard work and courage. She had been deployed to the outer colonies where most soldiers never volunteered to go. She had faced alien raiders and survived situations that killed experienced troops. Her combat scores were excellent and her record was clean. She explained to Morrison that Commander Phillips had personally requested her presence. She told him there must be some kind of mistake in the system. Morrison typed something on his device again, but his face did not change. He said he had no record of any request from Commander Phillips. He said all the other participants were already inside the facility and that Maya should contact her commanding officer to sort out the confusion. Behind Morrison, through the checkpoint barrier, Maya could see other soldiers walking toward the main building. She recognized some of them from previous training exercises. There was Major Kyle Patterson, who she had outscored in the last combat simulation. There was Lieutenant Greg Harper, who had failed the survival course that Maya had passed with high marks. Yet they were inside and she was standing here being turned away. Maya felt anger building, but she kept her voice calm. She asked Morrison to check the system one more time. Morrison did not even look at his device again. He simply said that his orders were clear and that she was not authorized to enter. He told her to move her vehicle because she was blocking the access road. Maya wanted to argue more, but she knew that Morrison was just following his instructions. The problem was higher up in the command chain. Someone had removed her name from the list and she needed to find out who and why. She walked back to her vehicle feeling frustrated and confused. She had never been denied access to a training exercise before. Her record was too good and her skills were too valuable. As she opened the door of her vehicle, she wondered if this was about something other than her qualifications. She had faced discrimination before in her career. Some officers still believed that women did not belong in combat roles even though women had proven themselves countless times. Maya had thought those attitudes were disappearing, but maybe she was wrong. She sat in the driver's seat and started the engine. She would drive back to base and find Commander Phillips. She would get answers. But as she put the vehicle in gear, her communication device buzzed. She looked at the screen and saw that the call was coming from an encrypted military channel. She answered and a woman's voice spoke. The voice was professional and direct. It said, "This is Director Helen Cartwright from Alliance Special Operations." The voice apologized for the confusion at the gate and said there had been an administrative error. Maya felt surprise. She asked what kind of error, and Director Cartwright explained that Maya's invitation had been flagged and removed from the system. The director said they were investigating why this happened, but that she was overriding the denial immediately. She told Maya to return to the checkpoint where Morrison would receive new instructions. Maya thanked the director and ended the call. She sat in her vehicle for a moment thinking about what had just happened. This was not a simple computer glitch. Someone had deliberately tried to keep her out of this drill. Someone with access to classified systems had flagged her name and removed her authorization. Maya drove back to the checkpoint. Morrison was still standing at his post and he looked annoyed when he saw her return. Then his device buzzed and he checked the screen. His expression changed to surprise and then to reluctance. He scanned Maya's identification again, and this time the system showed green approval. He told her she was cleared to enter but that she had missed the initial briefing. He said she would have to catch up on her own. Maya nodded and drove through the checkpoint. She parked her vehicle near the main building and got out. The facility was quiet. Most of the soldiers were already somewhere inside preparing for the drill. Maya walked to the entrance and a guard checked her credentials one more time before letting her through. Inside the building was cooler and the walls were painted plain white. Signs on the walls showed directions to different sections, but Maya did not see anyone to ask for help. She followed the signs that said briefing room and walked down a long hallway. Her boots made soft sounds on the polished floor. When she reached the briefing room, the door was open, but the room was empty. All the other participants had already moved on to the next stage. Maya stepped inside and saw a large holographic display in the center of the room. The display showed maps and tactical information. She approached it and began reading everything she could. The simulation involved a hostile alien planet with dangerous creatures and limited resources. The primary objective was to reach a communications hub deep in enemy territory and send a signal. Secondary objectives included survival, resource management, and tactical decision-making under pressure. Maya studied the holographic maps carefully and made mental notes of the terrain features and enemy positions. The simulation environment looked brutal, with rocky mountains, deep valleys, and areas marked as extreme danger zones. She noticed that the communications hub was located at the far end of the map, about 15 kilometers from the starting position. The route to reach it was filled with obstacles and hostile creatures. She saw that there were supply caches marked on the map, but they were spread out and some were in dangerous locations. This was going to be a test of endurance and strategic thinking as much as combat ability. A young woman in a technician uniform appeared in the doorway. Her name tag identified her as Corporal Lisa Hayes. She looked surprised to see Maya standing there. She asked if Maya was Captain Grant, and Maya confirmed. Hayes explained that all the other participants were already in the simulation pods, and that Maya would be inserted into the scenario late. She warned that this would put Maya at a significant disadvantage because the others had already established a forward base and secured initial resources. Maya told Hayes that she had faced worse odds before and that she was ready to begin. Hayes led Maya down another hallway to a room filled with simulation pods. The pods looked like large metal capsules with cushioned interiors and neural interface equipment. Maya had used simulation pods before, but these looked more advanced than the standard training models. Hayes explained that these pods created a fully immersive experience with real physical feedback. That meant Maya would feel pain, exhaustion, hunger, and every other sensation, as if she were actually on an alien planet. Hayes asked if Maya had any questions, and Maya said she did not. She climbed into the assigned pod, and Hayes helped her connect. The neural interface points to her temples and spine. The pod door closed and darkness surrounded Maya. Then light appeared, and suddenly she was standing on an alien world. The sky above her was deep red with two small suns visible near the horizon. The ground beneath her boots was rocky and dusty. Strange plants with purple leaves grew in clusters between the rocks. In the distance, she could see mountains with sharp peaks, and beyond them a faint glow that must be the communications hub. Her tactical display activated and showed her position as a small blue dot on the map. She could also see green dots representing the other participants. They were grouped together several kilometers away near what the map labeled as Forward Base Alpha. Maya checked her equipment loadout. She had a standard rifle with limited ammunition, a pistol, as backup a combat knife, some basic medical supplies, a canteen of water, and 3 days' worth of food rations. She also had a small toolkit for repairs and a portable scanner for detecting threats. It was not much, but it would have to be enough. She activated her communication link and heard voices talking. The other soldiers were coordinating their activities at the forward base. Someone was organizing a patrol and someone else was reporting on the status of their defenses. Maya decided not to announce her presence yet. She wanted to understand the situation before revealing that she had entered the simulation late. She began moving toward the communications hub using the terrain for cover. The rocks provided good concealment, and she moved carefully from one position to another. Her training had taught her that speed was less important than stealth in hostile territory. After about 30 minutes of careful movement, she heard a strange sound. It was a clicking noise that seemed to come from multiple directions at once. She dropped to a crouch behind a large boulder and activated her scanner. The device showed 3 hostile life forms approaching her position. They were marked as red dots on her display, and they were moving fast. Maya readied her rifle and waited. The clicking sound grew louder, and then she saw them. The creatures looked like a cross between insects and reptiles. They had 6 legs, multiple eyes, and sharp claws. Their bodies were covered in hard shells that looked like natural armor. They were about the size of large dogs, and they moved with frightening speed. Maya fired at the first creature, aiming for what she hoped was a weak point, where the head joined the body. Her shot was accurate, and the creature collapsed. The other 2 creatures changed direction and rushed toward her. She fired again, hitting the second creature, but the third one was too close. It leaped at her, and she barely had time to dodge. The creature's claws scraped against her armor, and her neural interface sent pain signals to her brain. The sensation felt absolutely real. Maya rolled to the side and fired her pistol at close range. The shot hit the creature in what looked like its eye, and it fell twitching to the ground. Maya took a moment to catch her breath. Her heart was pounding, and she could feel sweat on her face. The simulation technology was incredibly realistic. She checked her ammunition count and saw that she had used more rounds than she wanted to. She would need to be more conservative with her shots. She also noticed that her armor had taken damage from the creature's claws. The tactical display showed a yellow warning indicating reduced protection on her left side. She used some of her medical supplies to treat a minor wound where the claws had penetrated, through a weak spot in the armor. She continued moving toward the communications hub, but now she was more alert for threats. The alien creatures were clearly programmed to hunt in packs and to attack aggressively. She would need to avoid unnecessary combat whenever possible. Through her communication link, she heard the other soldiers reporting similar encounters. Major Patterson was coordinating a defensive perimeter at the forward base. Lieutenant Harper was asking for ammunition resupply. Someone else was reporting casualties and requesting that wounded personnel be pulled from the simulation. Maya reached a ridge that overlooked a wide valley. On the other side of the valley, she could see the forward base. It was a collection of temporary structures and defensive barriers. She counted approximately 15 soldiers moving around the base. Some were on guard duty, while others were working on fortifications. It looked like they were preparing for a sustained defense rather than pushing toward the objective. Maya understood their reasoning. The hostile creatures were dangerous, and without a secure base they would be vulnerable. But she also knew that defensive thinking would not complete the mission. She decided to take a different approach. Instead of joining the others at the forward base, she would continue alone toward the communications hub. It was risky, but it might also be more effective. A single person moving carefully could avoid detection better than a large group. She checked her map and identified a route that would take her through a canyon system. The canyon would provide cover from aerial threats and might have fewer hostile creatures. Maya descended from the ridge and moved toward the canyon entrance. The terrain was rough, and she had to climb over large rocks and navigate around deep crevices. Her legs began to ache from the constant climbing, and her canteen was already half empty. The twin suns beat down on her, and the heat was oppressive. She found a shaded area and took a short rest. While she rested, she listened to the communications from the forward base. The situation there was deteriorating. The hostile creatures were attacking in larger numbers, and the soldiers were using up their ammunition at an alarming rate. Major Patterson called for a tactical retreat to a more defensible position. Lieutenant Harper reported that 3 soldiers had taken serious injuries and needed to be extracted from the simulation. Maya heard Director Cartwright's voice come through on a command channel, asking for status reports from all participants. One by one, the soldiers reported their situations. Most of them were falling back to consolidate their defenses. When it was Maya's turn, she reported that she was proceeding independently toward the objective and was currently 3 kilometers from the forward base. There was a pause, and then Director Cartwright asked Maya to confirm her position and intentions. Maya confirmed that she was moving solo through the canyon system toward the communications hub. She said she believed that a small mobile force had a better chance of reaching the objective than a large group. Patterson interrupted and said that going alone was suicide. He ordered Maya to return to the forward base immediately. Maya respected Patterson, but she did not agree with his assessment. She politely declined his order and said she was continuing with her current plan. Patterson began to argue, but Director Cartwright cut him off. She told Maya that she was authorized to proceed at her own discretion, but that no support would be available if she encountered trouble. Maya acknowledged and ended the communication. She finished her rest and entered the canyon. The walls of the canyon rose high on both sides, blocking out some of the sunlight. The temperature dropped slightly, and Maya felt relief from the intense heat. The canyon floor was covered with smooth stones and a dry riverbed that must have carried water at some point in the past. She moved carefully, watching for signs of hostile creatures. The canyon was quiet except for the sound of wind whistling through the rock formations. After walking for about an hour, she found a supply cache hidden in a small cave. The cache contained ammunition, medical supplies, and 2 more days' worth of food rations. Maya restocked her equipment and felt more confident about her chances. She also found a damaged piece of equipment that looked like it might be useful. It was a portable shield generator, but it was not functioning. Maya used her toolkit to examine it, and after some work, she managed to get it partially operational. The shield would only last for a few seconds, but it might save her life in a critical moment. As she continued through the canyon, she began to notice changes in the simulation. The environment seemed to be adapting to her progress. New obstacles appeared that were not on the original map. Rock slides blocked certain paths, forcing her to find alternate routes. The hostile creatures began to appear in unexpected places. Maya realized that the simulation was not following a fixed script. It was actively responding to her decisions and making the challenge harder as she succeeded. She encountered a group of 5 creatures at a narrow section of the canyon. There was no way to avoid them and no cover to use for an ambush. Maya activated her portable shield generator and ran forward, firing her rifle. The shield absorbed the first few attacks from the creatures, giving her time to eliminate 2 of them. The shield failed and she had to rely on speed and accuracy. She killed a 3rd creature, but the 4th one managed to slash her leg. Pain shot through her body and she fell to one knee. The 5th creature lunged at her, but she fired her pistol at point-blank range and it collapsed on top of her. Maya pushed the dead creature off and checked her leg. The wound was deep and bleeding badly. She used her medical supplies to stop the bleeding and inject a painkiller. The wound would slow her down, but it was not fatal. She sat against the canyon wall for several minutes, recovering her strength. Through her communication link, she heard that the forward base was being overrun. Patterson ordered a full evacuation, and the soldiers began extracting from the simulation one by one. Within an hour, Maya was the only participant still active in the scenario. Director Cartwright contacted Maya directly on a private channel. She asked Maya if she wanted to extract as well. The director said that Maya had already proven her capabilities and that continuing alone with an injury was not necessary. Maya considered the offer for a moment. Her body was exhausted, her leg was wounded, and she was running low on ammunition. But she had come this far and she was not ready to quit. She told Director Cartwright that she was continuing the mission. The director was silent for a moment, and then she said that the simulation parameters were being adjusted. She warned Maya that what came next would be extremely difficult, and that the scenario was designed to push participants to their breaking point. Maya acknowledged the warning and stood up. She tested her injured leg and found that she could still walk, although with a limp. She continued through the canyon, leaving a small trail of blood behind her. The canyon eventually opened into a wide plateau. On the far side of the plateau, Maya could see the communications hub. It was a massive structure made of dark metal with energy barriers surrounding it. Synthetic guards patrolled the perimeter, and automated weapons tracked movement in the area. Maya found a position behind some rocks and studied the defenses through her scanner. A direct assault would be impossible. She needed to find another way inside. She spent an hour observing the patrol patterns and looking for weaknesses in the security system. She noticed that there was a maintenance access point on the east side of the structure. It was protected by an electronic lock, but it had fewer guards nearby. Maya waited until the patrol passed and then moved quickly across the open ground. Every step sent pain through her injured leg, but she forced herself to keep moving. She reached the access point and pulled out her toolkit. The electronic lock was more sophisticated than Maya had expected. It required a combination of physical bypass work and digital hacking. She pulled out the small computer from her toolkit and connected it to the lock's interface port. The computer began running decryption algorithms, while Maya worked on manually overriding the mechanical components. Sweat dripped down her face and her hands shook from exhaustion. She could hear the patrol approaching in the distance and knew she only had a few minutes before they would spot her. The computer screen showed progress bars moving slowly across the display. Maya worked on the mechanical lock, using tools to carefully manipulate the internal mechanisms. She had learned these skills during her training for special operations, but she had never used them under such pressure. The patrol was getting closer and she could hear their footsteps on the metal surface. Her heart pounded in her chest and she forced herself to stay calm. Panic would lead to mistakes and mistakes would lead to failure. The final mechanism clicked into place and the access panel began to open. Maya grabbed her equipment and slipped inside just as the patrol rounded the corner. She pressed herself against the interior wall and held her breath. Through the narrow gap in the closing access panel, she could see two synthetic guards walk past. They did not notice the door closing behind them. Maya exhaled slowly and allowed herself a moment of relief. She was inside the communications hub. The interior was dark and filled with the hum of machinery. Maya activated a small light on her rifle and began exploring. The corridors were narrow and lined with pipes and cables. She consulted her scanner and found a path toward the central control room. The scanner also showed multiple security systems including cameras, motion detectors, and automated defense turrets. She would need to disable or avoid each one. She moved slowly and carefully, studying each obstacle before proceeding. The first camera was mounted at an intersection of two corridors. Maya waited until the camera rotated away from her position, and then she quickly moved past it. The second camera required more work. She used her computer to hack into its control system and create a loop in its recording. The camera would show an empty corridor while she passed underneath it. The third obstacle was a motion detector that covered an entire hallway. Maya could not hack it and she could not go around it. She noticed that the detector was calibrated to sense rapid movement. She moved very slowly, taking tiny steps and pausing frequently. It took almost 15 minutes to cross the hallway, but the detector did not trigger. The automated turrets were the most dangerous obstacles. They were programmed to fire at anything that moved, and they had perfect accuracy. Maya found a maintenance shaft that ran parallel to the corridor where the turrets were located. She crawled through the shaft, which was barely wide enough for her body. The metal surface was cold against her skin and the air was stale. Her injured leg scraped against the walls and sent waves of pain through her body. She bit down on her lip to keep from crying out. After what felt like an eternity, she emerged from the shaft in a corridor beyond the turrets. She was now close to the central control room. Her scanner showed one final barrier. There was a security door that required an access code. Maya examined the door and found that it was connected to the facility's main computer network. She connected her computer and began trying to hack the system. The security was strong and her first attempts failed. She tried different approaches using techniques she had learned, and some she improvised on the spot. Time seemed to slow down as she worked. Her body was exhausted and her mind was foggy from fatigue. She could feel the neural interface sending signals of pain, hunger, and thirst. The simulation was designed to replicate real physical stress, and it was working. Maya wanted to rest, but she knew that stopping now would mean failure. She pushed through the exhaustion and focused entirely on the hacking task. After 40 minutes of continuous work, she found a vulnerability in the security system. She exploited it and the door unlocked with a soft click. Maya entered the central control room. It was a large space filled with computer terminals, holographic displays, and communication equipment. In the center of the room was the main communications array. This was her objective. She approached the array and activated the control terminal. A screen appeared asking for command authorization. Maya expected this and began entering the codes that had been provided in her briefing materials. The screen rejected her codes and displayed an error message. She tried again with the same result. Maya felt frustration rising, but she forced it down. She examined the error message carefully and realized that the codes in her briefing were incomplete. This was another test. She needed to figure out the correct command sequence using logic and her knowledge of military protocols. She sat down at the terminal and began working through the problem methodically. She analyzed the pattern of the required code and compared it to standard military encryption systems. The solution was based on tactical doctrine that she had memorized years ago during her advanced training. It was a mathematical sequence that corresponded to unit deployment patterns. Maya entered the sequence step by step, checking each calculation twice. When she entered the final digit, the screen turned green and the communications array powered up. A confirmation message appeared indicating that the distress signal had been sent successfully. The mission objective was complete. The simulation environment froze suddenly. The lights stopped flickering and the hum of machinery went silent. Maya felt a strange sensation as the neural interface disconnected. Then everything dissolved into darkness. She became aware of the simulation pod around her. The harness released and the door opened. She tried to stand, but her legs were weak. She stumbled out of the pod and caught herself against the wall. Her body was covered in sweat and every muscle ached. She looked at the clock on the wall and was shocked to see how much time had passed. 16 hours had passed since Maya entered the simulation pod. She had been inside the virtual environment for 16 continuous hours without breaks or rest. Her body felt like it had actually been through combat on an alien planet. Her leg throbbed with phantom pain from the simulated injury. Her throat was dry and she could barely stand. Corporal Hayes rushed over with a bottle of water and helped Maya to a nearby chair. Maya drank the water slowly and tried to process what she had just experienced. Director Cartwright entered the observation room, followed by several high-ranking officers. Their expressions showed a mixture of surprised respect and something else that Maya could not quite identify. Director Cartwright approached and told Maya that she had been in the simulation for 16 hours. She said that every other participant had dropped out within the first 6 hours. Major Patterson had lasted the longest calling for extraction after his virtual squad was eliminated in an ambush. Lieutenant Harper had quit after 4 hours, citing impossible parameters and unfair conditions. Maya looked at the director and said that the simulation parameters had been beyond the specifications in the briefing materials. Director Cartwright nodded and admitted that this was true. She explained that the simulation was designed to exceed normal limits. It was built to identify individuals who could complete impossible missions. The military needed to know who would quit when things got too hard, and who would adapt and find ways to succeed. The drill was not just about tactical skills or combat ability. It was about mental toughness, persistence, and creative problem-solving under extreme pressure. One of the officers stepped forward. He introduced himself as General Frank Donovan, and he commanded the Alliance Special Operations Division. He told Maya that the Alliance was facing new types of threats that conventional military forces were not prepared to handle. Enemy forces that adapted too quickly to standard tactics. Situations where normal protocols led to failure. Combat scenarios that required soldiers to operate alone without support or backup. The Alliance needed to identify people who could handle these unique challenges. General Donovan explained that the simulation drill had been conducted at multiple facilities across the Alliance territory. Hundreds of soldiers had been invited to participate. The vast majority quit or failed within the first few hours. A small number made it past 6 hours. Only a handful reached 10 hours. Maya was the first person to complete the full simulation and achieve the primary objective. She had done something that the designers thought might be impossible. They had expected everyone to fail eventually, and had planned to select the participants who lasted the longest. Director Cartwright added that Maya's name had been deliberately removed from the access list at the beginning. This was part of the test. The people running the selection wanted to see how she would react to being turned away. Would she give up and go home, or would she find a way to get inside anyway? When Maya called her commanding officer to complain, Director Cartwright had been monitoring the situation. She had overridden the denial and allowed Maya to enter. But by that time, Maya had already missed the initial briefing and entered the simulation late, putting her at a severe disadvantage compared to the others. Maya listened to all this information and felt a strange mix of emotions. She was proud that she had completed the simulation, but also angry that she had been manipulated and tested in ways beyond the stated parameters. She asked Director Cartwright why they had made things so difficult. Why not just run a fair test and evaluate people based on clear standards? The director smiled slightly and said that the real world was not fair. Enemy forces did not follow rules or give advance warning. Soldiers in the field faced unexpected challenges and unfair situations constantly. The simulation was designed to replicate that reality. General Donovan told Maya that she should rest and recover. Medical personnel would check her to make sure the extended simulation had not caused any lasting harm. He said they would speak again in a few days after Maya had time to think about everything. He mentioned that there would be opportunities available for someone with her capabilities if she was interested. Maya nodded and allowed Corporal Hayes to escort her to the medical bay. The medical examination took 2 hours. The doctors checked her vital signs, ran tests on her brain activity, and monitored her for any adverse effects from the prolonged neural interface connection. They said she was dehydrated and exhausted but otherwise healthy. They gave her fluids and nutrients and told her to sleep. Maya was taken to a private room in the facility. She collapsed on the bed and fell asleep immediately. She slept for 14 hours straight without dreaming. When she woke up, her body still ached, but her mind felt clearer. She showered and put on a clean uniform that had been left for her. She found food waiting in her room and ate hungrily. After she finished eating, there was a knock on her door. It was Director Cartwright. The director asked if Maya felt well enough to talk, and Maya said yes. They walked together to a small conference room. where General Donovan and two other senior officers were waiting. The general introduced the other officers as Colonel Janet Price and Commander Scott Murphy. They were both part of the Special Operations Division and had been involved in designing the simulation drill. General Donovan asked Maya to sit, and then he began explaining the real purpose of everything that had happened. He said that the Alliance had recently made first contact with an alien species called the Krell Syndicate. The Krell were technologically advanced and highly territorial. They had made it clear that humanity's expansion into certain sectors of space would not be tolerated. Director Cartwright activated a holographic display showing star maps with highlighted zones. These were areas where the Krell had drawn boundaries. Human colonies and military outposts were dangerously close to these zones. The Alliance had tried diplomatic negotiations, but the Krell were not interested in compromise. Several small conflicts had already occurred. Human forces had attempted to defend their positions using standard military tactics, but the Krell adapted quickly and countered every strategy. Conventional warfare was proving ineffective. Colonel Price explained that the Alliance needed a different approach. They needed small teams of highly skilled operatives who could handle missions that regular forces could not complete. These operatives would work alone or in pairs conducting reconnaissance, sabotage, and other specialized operations. They would need to think creatively, operate without support, and succeed where standard procedures failed. The simulation drill had been designed to find people with these exact capabilities. Maya had proven that she possessed them. Commander Murphy added that the Alliance was forming a new unit called Task Force Sentinel. This unit would consist of the best operatives identified through the simulation drills. They would receive specialized training and equipment. They would handle the missions that no one else could complete. The work would be dangerous and the success rate was uncertain. Many missions would require operatives to go into hostile territory, with minimal support and no guarantee of extraction if things went wrong. It was not the kind of assignment that most soldiers wanted, but it was critically important for humanity's survival in an increasingly dangerous galaxy. General Donovan looked directly at Maya and said that she was being offered a position in Task Force Sentinel. The offer came with a promotion to major and access to classified resources and technology. She would report directly to Director Cartwright and would have significant autonomy in how she conducted her missions. But she would also face challenges unlike anything in conventional military service. The general made it clear that Maya could decline the offer with no negative impact on her career. The Alliance needed volunteers, not conscripts, for this type of work. Maya sat quietly for a moment, considering everything she had been told. She had spent her entire military career trying to prove herself, fighting against people who doubted her abilities because of her gender, working twice as hard as her peers to earn recognition. She had succeeded on her own terms, but it had been exhausting. Now she was being offered something different. A chance to join an elite unit where her skills were not just accepted, but desperately needed. A mission that mattered more than politics or personal advancement. She asked Director Cartwright what happened to her invitation at the start of the drill, who had removed her name from the access list and why. The director hesitated and then explained that certain officers in the Alliance command structure had objected to Maya's inclusion in the selection process. These officers believed that the simulation would be too difficult for her. They thought she would fail quickly and that her failure would waste time and resources. They had used their authority to flag her name and block her access, hoping she would simply go away when turned away at the gate. Maya felt anger rising, but she kept her expression neutral. She asked if those officers would face any consequences for their actions. General Donovan said that the matter was being addressed through proper channels. What mattered now was that Maya had proven those officers completely wrong. She had not just passed the test. She had exceeded every expectation and accomplished what no one else could. Her performance had forced the Alliance leadership to recognize that their biases were causing them to overlook exceptional talent. Colonel Price told Maya that times were changing in the military. The old attitudes about who could serve in combat roles were being challenged by reality. Soldiers like Maya, who could outperform their peers regardless of gender or background, were becoming impossible to ignore. Task Force Sentinel would be judged entirely on results, not on outdated prejudices. The unit would succeed or fail based on the capabilities of its members, nothing else. Maya made her decision. She told General Donovan that she accepted the offer. She said she was ready to join Task Force Sentinel and take on whatever missions the Alliance needed her to complete. The general smiled and stood to shake her hand. He said she was making the right choice. Director Cartwright said that Maya's first mission would begin soon. There was a situation developing in a region called the Epsilon sector that required immediate attention. Intelligence reports indicated that the Krell Syndicate was building a military installation on a planet that the Alliance had claimed years earlier. The installation threatened several human colonies and could serve as a launching point for Krell expansion into Alliance territory. Standard reconnaissance missions had failed because the Krell detected every ship and probe that approached the planet. The Alliance needed someone to go in quietly, gather intelligence, and determine whether the installation could be disabled or destroyed. It was exactly the type of impossible mission that Task Force Sentinel was designed to handle. Maya would be going alone with only remote support from Alliance Command. Commander Murphy brought up detailed information about the Epsilon sector on the holographic display. The target planet was called Epsilon Prime. It had a harsh environment with extreme temperatures and a thin atmosphere. The Krell installation was located in a mountain range on the northern continent. Satellite imagery showed heavy fortifications and a significant military presence. Getting onto the planet undetected would be difficult. Reaching the installation would be even harder. Completing the mission and extracting safely would require skills and determination that few soldiers possessed. Maya studied the information, carefully asking questions about the Krell forces, the planetary conditions, and the available resources. She learned that the Krell were efficient fighters with advanced weapons and armor. They had sophisticated detection systems and responded quickly to threats. Their command structure was decentralized, which made them adaptable, but also created potential vulnerabilities. Maya began forming ideas about how to approach the mission. She would need time to plan and prepare, but she felt confident that she could succeed. The briefing continued for several hours. Maya received access to classified intelligence files about the Krell Syndicate. She learned about their culture, technology, and military tactics. She studied previous encounters between Alliance forces and Krell units. She analyzed what had worked and what had failed. The more she learned, the more she understood why conventional approaches were not effective. The Krell thought differently than humans. They valued collective survival over individual glory. They adapted quickly to enemy tactics and shared information instantly across their forces. Fighting them required unconventional thinking and unpredictable strategies. Director Cartwright explained that Maya would have 2 days to prepare before departing for the Epsilon sector. She would receive specialized equipment, including a stealth suit with advanced camouflage capabilities. She would have access to experimental weapons that were not available to regular forces. She would also receive training on emergency extraction procedures in case the mission went wrong. The director emphasized that Maya's safety was a priority, but that the mission objectives were critical to Alliance security. It was a delicate balance between risk and necessity. Maya spent the next 2 days preparing for the mission with an intensity she had never experienced before. She trained with the stealth suit, learning how its adaptive camouflage systems worked and how to move without triggering motion sensors. The suit was made from advanced materials that could change color and texture to match the surrounding environment. It also had built-in shielding that reduced her thermal signature and electromagnetic emissions. She practiced wearing the suit for extended periods, getting used to its weight and limitations. The suit was not perfect and it required careful management of its power systems, but it was the best technology the Alliance had. She also trained with new weapons, including a plasma rifle that fired superheated energy bolts and a compact explosive device that could be used for sabotage or creating diversions. The plasma rifle was more powerful than standard firearms, but it had limited charge capacity. She would need to make every shot count. The explosive device could be configured for different blast patterns and timers. Maya practiced arming and disarming it until she could do it by instinct, even under pressure. The physical training was intense. She ran obstacle courses, climbed simulated mountain terrain, and practiced hand-to-hand combat against synthetic opponents. Her instructors pushed her hard, knowing that her life might depend on her physical conditioning. Maya welcomed the challenge. She had always been driven to improve, and now she had a clear purpose. Every drill, every exercise brought her closer to mission readiness. By the end of the second day, she felt prepared, though she knew that real combat would be different from any training scenario. On the morning of departure, Maya reported to the launch facility. A small stealth ship was waiting for her. The ship was designed to avoid detection using advanced sensor masking technology. It could carry one person and had minimal life support systems. The flight to the Epsilon sector would take 3 days, during which Maya would be alone in the cramped cockpit, with nothing but her thoughts and mission plans. Director Cartwright met her at the launch bay to provide final instructions and wish her good luck. The director told Maya that she had confidence in her abilities and that the Alliance was counting on her. General Donovan also came to see Maya off. He told her that what she was about to do mattered more than she might realize. The success or failure of this mission would determine whether Task Force Sentinel continued as a program. If Maya succeeded, it would prove that the unconventional approach worked. If she failed, the program might be shut down, and the Alliance would have to find other ways to deal with the Krell threat. The general did not say it to pressure Maya, but to make sure she understood the stakes. Maya appreciated his honesty and promised that she would do everything in her power to complete the mission. The flight to Epsilon Prime was lonely and uncomfortable. The cockpit was barely large enough for Maya to move around, and the ship's engines created a constant low humming sound that made it hard to sleep. She spent most of the time reviewing mission data and running through contingency plans in her mind. She thought about what she had learned about the Krell and tried to anticipate how they would respond to different situations. She also thought about the simulation drill and how it had tested her in ways she had not expected. The real mission would be similar. Nothing would go exactly as planned, and she would need to adapt constantly. When the ship finally reached the Epsilon sector, Maya felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. Everything she had trained for was about to become real. The ship approached Epsilon Prime using a trajectory designed to avoid detection. Maya piloted the vessel manually, making small course corrections to minimize her sensor signature. As she entered the planet's atmosphere, she activated the stealth systems and descended toward the northern continent. The landing site was a remote valley about 50 kilometers from the Krell installation. The landing was rough. The ship touched down hard on rocky terrain, and Maya was thrown against her restraints. She checked the systems and confirmed that the ship was intact. She gathered her equipment, including the stealth suit weapons and survival gear. She set the ship's self-destruct mechanism to activate if anyone other than her tried to access it. Then she exited the ship and looked around. The planet's surface was harsh and barren. The thin atmosphere made breathing difficult even with her helmet's filtration system. The temperature was cold enough that she could see her breath. In the distance, she could see the mountains where the Krell installation was located. Maya activated her suit's camouflage and began moving toward the mountains. The terrain was challenging with loose rocks and steep slopes. She moved carefully, testing each foothold before committing her weight. The journey would take at least 10 hours, and she needed to conserve her strength. She had rations and water, but she knew that fatigue would be her biggest enemy. She found a rhythm in her movement, focusing on steady progress rather than speed. As she walked, she scanned the area with her portable sensor, looking for signs of Krell patrols or automated surveillance systems. After 6 hours of travel, she spotted her first Krell patrol. 3 figures were moving along a ridge about 2 kilometers away. They wore armor that looked similar to the Alliance designs, but with different configurations. They carried weapons that Maya did not recognize. She crouched behind a rock formation and observed them through her scope. The Krell moved with purpose and coordination, checking their surroundings regularly. They were professional soldiers who took their duties seriously. Maya waited until they moved out of sight before continuing her approach. As she got closer to the installation, she encountered more patrols and detection systems. The Krell had set up sensor posts at strategic locations to monitor the approaches to their base. Maya used her stealth suit and careful timing to avoid detection. She found gaps in their coverage and exploited them. She moved during weather changes when the sensors were less effective. She crawled through areas where the terrain provided natural concealment. It was slow, exhausting work, but she made steady progress.